Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Doing well? Good, good. I am really excited for the second day of the 10th annual UNC Cleantech Summit. Before we get started, I want to thank again all of our sponsors. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do this. And to everyone on all of the teams throughout UNC who have helped us make this happen. So Greg and the Institute for the Environment, our team at ACES, and everybody, Kirsten, who's been helping all of this happen minute by minute. This has been an incredible event, and we're excited for day two. I'm excited too because I get the distinct honor and pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker of the day, Dr. Henry C. McKoy, Jr. Not in the bio is that in January, he received a new presidential appointment as Senior Advisor to the Undersecretary of the U.S. Office of Science and Innovation in the U.S. Department of Energy. Before that, he was the inaugural Director of the Office of State and Community Energy Programs in the Department of Energy. There, they managed $16 billion, with a B, dollars in federal funding and supports, and they support the transition to an equitable clean energy economy and future for us by working with community-level implementation, as well as partners in state energy offices. He is a seasoned professional, to say the least. He is magnificent at systems. He is able to connect things across boundaries and across barriers and get people to work together and collaborate more than maybe anybody I've ever met in my entire life. He's a professional in business, community and economic development, policy, government, energy, finance, philanthropy, and academia. So you start to get a feel for that right there. Prior to his presidential appointments now, he served as the lead entrepreneurial faculty and director of entrepreneurship at North Carolina Central University's School of Business here in Durham, North Carolina. He also served as managing director of the North Carolina Central University Eagle Angel Network, and was a professor of the practice in strategy and entrepreneurship at Kenan-Flagler Business School here at UNC Chapel Hill. He also served from 2010 to 2012 in the North Carolina Department of Commerce, where he was appointed by then Governor Beverly Perdue as Assistant Secretary of Commerce, which is the top community development official and representative in the North Carolina government. I looked down because there's a lot of words in a lot of those. But what's not in the profile are a few things. You can find out much more on his LinkedIn profile because that only goes back to 2010. But well, first of all, he's a Tar Heel. He was a two-time member of the All-American 4x400 relay team for the Tar Heels when he went to undergrad here. He got his undergraduate business degree in business here at UNC Chapel Hill. He has a master's in environmental management from Duke University, and he got his PhD from the Department of City and Regional Planning here at UNC Chapel Hill as well. I would say, most importantly, he is a loving father and husband with an extraordinary family. And if you get to spend just 2 minutes with him, you'll feel like he's one of your best friends. He is all about the people that he's talking to. So with that, Henry, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jeff. I feel like I need to take you on the road with me or something. I like that. But yeah, Jeff has been a great friend over the years. I met him when he came here to get his MBA, and had a chance to spend time with him. We was talking earlier, speaking of global warming or whatever the case, Jeff and his wife got married on a day. It seemed like, I guess, a hurricane was coming through or something. It was at the top of the hill, and it's always memorable. And he was telling me how, he got a chance to take pictures all over the campus because nobody else was around, and got to use the backdrop. But I thank you so much, and I appreciate the UNC Institute for putting this on. This is a wonderful program. Jeff and folks like Marcus and Greg and others who bring folks together for important conversations like this. This is the 10th anniversary. I mean, and that says a lot, 10 years. So I want to congratulate you on that decade of this program going on. It's wonderful. And so I spoke here last year, as Jeff mentioned, and I remember when he reached out to me, which was a long time ago. He said, I want you to speak again. I'm like, wait, I just spoke, and and I was like, and I don't often speak at the same place, certainly not in consecutive years, because it takes me a little while to get my words together, right? And so I said, okay, well, what do you want me to talk about? He said, well, talk about 1 year later. And so, it has been a year since I've been here. As he mentioned in the introduction, I've recently made a move from the role I was leading when I got to the Department of Energy of standing up this new $16 billion organization to now serving as a senior advisor in the U.S. Office of Social Science and Innovation. And my talk is going to kind of revolve around that somewhat. As I said, I was trying to figure out what am I going to talk about a year later. And so in order to, as I think about this idea from infrastructure to innovation, right, that kind of connects to my journey over the last year. I said, well, what does that mean? And I think about something like infrastructure. You think about substance, right? Substance. I think about innovation. I think about form. So hopefully this talk will have some aspect of substance, some aspect of form. So as I thought about, what do I want to talk about? I was thinking about it this week. I still hadn't got my words together. And so there's two things that became important to me as I thought about, this conference and this talk. So the first thing I thought about was, what to wear, right? And that was partly because I did do this talk last year, right? So the first thing I made sure I couldn't wear the same thing I wore last year, right? So I was like, there's actually a video out there. So I was like, okay, so I went out last night to actually watch the video to make sure so I could see what I wore. So I was like, well, the first thing I do is I got to make sure I wore something different than I wore last year. So I am dressed in a different suit. Second thing, and I learned this from, I was at some years ago, I was at an event with the SBA administrator, and she was sitting beside me before she talked. She just had this kind of very, worried look on her face, and she was just, she's like she was really thinking about something hard. So she got up on the stage, and she kind of told us all what was on her mind while she was, grimacing and really thinking about that. She said, the next time I come to speak, I want to make sure that I'm not wearing the same thing I have on the picture that they put into the program, right? And so it's funny. I always have to look at my official portrait, right? Because I'm like, well, I want people to think that I do change clothes, and so when you put on a suit for official portrait, then from that point on, it kind of gets retired. So that's the first thing, right? What do I wear? So I think I took care of that. The second thing was, of course, the most important thing, what do I say? So I was here yesterday. I got a chance to kind of, sit and hear all the great presentations and the conversations, the lunch conversation. Deputy Turk from the Secretary, from the Department of Energy, obviously is, we're part of the same team. So what do I say? And so as I thought about what do I say, again, I listened yesterday and listened to Deputy Secretary Turk, listened to EPA Administrator Regan. I was like, well, I shouldn't repeat what they say, right? I mean, because I know you hear all these statistics and how much money we have and all the things that we're doing and this program and that program. I said, well, I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to just talk about the same programs over and over again. I know that can get a little bit old. So I decided I wouldn't say that. Aforementioned speech last year, I was like, well, I can't say what I said last year. So that was helpful last night as about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was looking at my speech online, listening to it. It's a very uncomfortable thing to watch yourself speak. And so I'm watching and I say, well, I talked last year about this idea of equitable deployment. I kind of use this as a stage thinking about, sending folks out, kind of like graduation. We're here, we got these resources. Let's go out and do this wonderful work in the community. And so I talked about that. I talked about, some of the parameters that I put around my team, core, more, door, SOAR, all those kind of things. And, I said, well, I can't talk about that this year. So the words were not really coming to me in a lot of ways. So I had to think about it. So for me, this last week, it's been kind of I would say an emotional week, but it's really been more of a reflective week. And let me give you some context for the, why it's been a reflective week. So March is the month that marks the anniversary of my mother's passing. So 17 years ago this March, my mother passed away. She was, a very strong woman, very passionate woman, a very resilient woman, a very patient woman. She wasn't superly formally educated, but she was very smart. And so I was thinking about my mother, partly because, this is one of those interesting things that I can say is absolutely true. My mother passed away 17 years ago in March, and I still think about her every single day. At some point in the day, I think about my mother for one reason or another. Yesterday, when the Administrator Regan was talking about, going through Cancer Alley and things of that nature, in the Gulf and things of that nature, I thought about my mother because she passed away from cancer. She was only 55 years old. So my mother's birthday, she would have been 73 had she lived on this past Monday. And so, of course, I'm thinking about all these things and reflection, and the great thing about time is that it does heal, right? So when I think about my mother every day, it's good thoughts. It's just great memories and things of that nature. So this week I was thinking about my mother. Again, her birthday was Monday, and she would have been 73 and things of that nature. And so when I think about infrastructure, I think about that substance, that core, and my mother in a lot of ways and our family was always that core. And so my mother taught me a lot of things. Like I said, she wasn't superly formally educated, but I remember growing up, she used to do puzzles. She used to love puzzles, all kind of puzzles, right? And so she had an incredible amount of patience for doing that kind of work. And so as I think about the work that we do, I think about puzzles. So my mother loved those word puzzles, right? You see all the letters on the page. You got to find the word inside the words, and she loved doing those, right? And I think about the work that we do in climate, the work that we do in energy, the work that we do in this transition. It's oftentimes finding codes, right? It's oftentimes finding things within, a bunch of noise. You got to figure out how to be patient and look and find those words, find those codes, new technologies, new approaches, new strategies. And so, those some of the things that my mother taught me. She also loved the crossword puzzles, right? It wasn't necessarily New York Times crossword. We didn't get the New York Times, but, she had those little books that you get and crosswords for days. And so sometimes the work that we do is like you get a clue, and you got to figure out exactly what it is that they're trying to tell you. And I think about my mother doing those puzzles and looking at those clues, and she would love it when she would get that word right. Sometimes you have to scratch it out because it's not the word you thought it was, or, it's 10 boxes and you come up with 9 letters or whatever the case. And so, a lot of times this work that we do is like that. You get a little clue here, you get a little clue there. You got to figure out, well, okay, what does this mean? Sometimes you have to scratch it out because it's not what you thought it was, but you keep on going, right, until you get that whole puzzle filled out. What my mother spent a lot of her time doing was working on jigsaw puzzles. And I remember she had the bigger the better. She had these 5,000 piece puzzles, these 10,000 piece puzzles. I just did not have the patience for that. But she would sit there and she would put that puzzle together, put all the pieces out on the table. And as I think about the work that we have to do in climate change and greenhouse gas reduction and all those kind of things, it is a puzzle. It's a whole lot of pieces that's laid out that we have to figure out where do they go. And you've seen, I assume you've done jigsaw puzzles, or at least the older generation. I don't know the younger generation, whether you have or not, but you get a jigsaw puzzle, got this beautiful picture on the box. You got all these pieces, and like a third of those pieces all look alike. It's like the cloud, and it's like the blue, it's like the white, and you got to figure out how to put those pieces together and create a picture. You think about what Deputy Secretary Turk said yesterday related to, putting together visions and things of that nature. Administrator Regan talked about, when he went from North Carolina to DC, he took the plan that he had put together here and implemented it in some of the work that he was doing at EPA. And so, planning is great, planning is wonderful. And so, you have this box of this puzzle, and you got this vision that you're trying to get to, and you got these pieces, and you're trying to put them together, and you start, sometimes you start with the outside. They tell you to start with the outside, and you put together some pieces fit. Sometimes you try to make them fit, and they don't really fit. And so I think the work that we do is a lot like that. It's a puzzle. It's a lot of pieces. The pieces scattered everywhere, and you got to figure out how to put those pieces together. And slowly and methodically, you do that. And I think about, hopefully you have a plan. Hopefully you have a box. Sometimes you don't have a box to look at and say, okay, this is what this is supposed to look like. Let me make this work. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about, Mike Tyson's favorite quote. Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, right? And and we get punched in the face a lot in this work because you think you're doing something, and then someone comes along and someone's pushing you and all that. So you just got to stay resilient. You got to keep moving. You got to keep pushing as this work goes on. So I think about my mother and the patience that she had to put these puzzles together and to come up with this beautiful picture. So that's what I always try to do. Think about the vision that I want and how do you put together those pieces. So, the word, I talked about my mother finding the words and all the letters, the noise, the crosswords where you got to take a clue and figure out, what it is that the word they're looking for. The jigsaw puzzle, all these pieces you got to pull together to create this beautiful vision, this outcome. The thing my mother loved the most, and I don't know where she got this kind of desire, but she was incredibly competitive. I mean, she was like the most competitive person, I ever met in my life. Jeff talked about my track career. I wouldn't want to run against my mother, right? She was very competitive. But the thing she loved the most of all, she loved playing Scrabble. And then she, so we ended up, I remember one year we got her for Christmas, the deluxe Scrabble edition, right? It's the big board and it's got, all these kind of things. And so my mother loved Scrabble, and she would challenge you in a moment, you're walking by, come sit down and play Scrabble. And, okay, she's your mother, you have, what choice you have? When you think about Scrabble, the whole idea of sticking your hand in a bag and that's shaking up, pulling out letters that you have no control over. And you get these letters, you look at them, and some of them have more value than the other. You got big word, Z's get you all this, and X's get you this, and A's not so much. And so, but you have to figure out how to take things that you have no control over and put them together in a word that actually makes sense. That's defensible, right? You can go to that dictionary and say, wait, that's not a word. But I think about that as well because, again, a lot of the work that we do is taking things that come to you that you may not have any full control over. And so, my mother taught me about patience and resilience and trying to follow a vision, trying to take codes and cues and things of that nature. And I think we can all take a lesson from that in the work that we do around climate. It is hard work. It work that you have to do both. You have to do in a way that is quick, but also a certain level with patience. So as I thought about the words I wanted to say today, again, that came to me. So that's one thing. So this idea of infrastructure and substance, my mother represents substance to me. She certainly laid the foundation for my life and who I am, and I appreciate that. And so I think that's perhaps the first lesson I want to talk about or give you. The second thing is another interesting part of my week. So I've been here in North Carolina pretty much all week. I do live in D.C. now for this appointment, but my family still has a home base here. So I took this opportunity, since I was going to speak here this week. I was like, hey, I come and hang out in North Carolina a little bit, enjoy the spring, even though it depends on what day it was, depending on what day, whether it was spring or not. I left out this morning, I was like, ooh, is the winter coming back? But so I took in a play earlier this week over in Durham at Hillside High School. Hillside High School put on a play, they put on a rendition of Annie, the beautiful musical. So I went to see the play. I loved it. And it's hard to go see Annie and not start singing, right? Those kind of things. I first saw Annie when it came out in 1982. I wasn't as old as this conference. I was only 9 years old in 1982. So I saw Annie. So I went to see the play Annie. And it was all African-American rendition. Hillside is a historically black high school, so I went to see Annie, and, humming and things. And so what it made me want to do is actually, after I saw the play, I wanted to go watch the movie again, right? So I go to Netflix, I pull up the movie, and I'm watching the movie, the 1982 version, and, just having a good time from that standpoint. But the interesting thing is that the whole time I'm watching Andy, the thing that's going through my mind is Jay-Z. And all of you may not get that, some of you young people might get it, but Jay-Z has a rendition of A Hard Knock Life, right? So I'm sitting there watching this show, and all I can think about is Jay-Z. and so, and the reason why that has any relevance to this, right? I think about innovation. And I was like, well, who in the world would have ever thought that this 1982 song by a group of orphans, Annie the movie was largely a white cast. I mentioned Hillside was an all-black cast. And I'm sitting there thinking about Jay-Z and Hard Knock Life. I'm like, well, who would ever thought that someone would be able to see a song that showed up in a Broadway musical to connect that to some kind of hip hop, right? And if you know the Jay-Z rendition, it really is on the backdrop of the notion of a hard knock life against kind of some of the challenges that the urban community has and kids have in the urban community. So it's a very innovative and creative way to blend those things together. And so I mention that because I wanted, when I talk about from infrastructure to innovation, I want to cast this notion of the importance of open innovation, right? The idea of creating a platform where people can connect to, where people can bring their talents and their skills, their unique perspectives to that work. It's important in this work that we do because this is such a big task that we're faced with. If you remember, if you were here yesterday, and Deputy Secretary Turk had this graphic on the screen that showed what has to be done in order to get to this net zero world by 2050. It's a steep slope. I've seen that slide before. We had a leadership retreat at the beginning of the new year where we went over these kind of statistics and things of that nature. What came out of that meeting was really this idea that the $1 trillion that went into the bipartisan infrastructure law, the $369 billion that went into the Inflation Reduction Act, all of the tax credits and everything that we have within the CHIPS and Science Act, if everything that we put together, or that President Biden and the administration put together and Congress passed went perfect, I mean absolutely perfect, then we may squeak through and hit those goals. And we know how hard it is to get to perfect, right? But I mention that because, as I always tell folks, there's no way you get to these goals without everybody being a part of it, right? You don't get there with part of the community being a part of it. You don't get there with this part of the community being a part of it. You don't get there with just America doing it. You don't get there with just, the allied countries get there. You got to do it comprehensively. And so a part of that is being created around, again, this notion of open innovation. And so, you got the Annie and you got the Hard Knock Life in my mind. We also, this is March Madness. I was up last night watching basketball games, and I saw NC State pull it off again, and all those kind of things. But if you think about basketball as well, right? We're in the middle of March Madness. You look at the floor of a court now. The floor of the court looks a lot different now than it did historically. You saw the integration of basketball from a racial standpoint, as it went from in a lot of ways, all white teams to taking all black teams, blend them together to integrated teams. In the last several decades, essentially since the Dream Team in 1992, we've seen more and more international players come in, right? It's a different game. I mean, it's just a different game, but it's a better game because you bring all these different people together, these different skills, these different backgrounds. It's a much better game. So that's what open innovation is about, right? It's creating a platform where everybody can plug in their talents and bring their own skills to the table. And we need to do that in this work. And so as I wrap up and start concluding my talks, I want you to think about those two things, from infrastructure to innovation, and the importance that we're going to have in order to make this energy transition, in order to make this energy transition equitable. Those things have to come in play. And so, I'm doing this talk 1 year later. And again, I made this transition a couple of months ago from the infrastructure team to the innovation team. But for me, it all works together. And part of that is because as I think about the work that we do, money comes, sometimes in huge chunks. It's like manna from heaven, right? You have every decade or so, huge legislation passes and the money drops down. we have to make investments in that, in the infrastructure. We have to, figure out how did that money go out? How does it go out in the most efficient, effective, impactful way to create the outcomes that you want, right? To get to that puzzle box. How do we do that? And it's important to make the right choices around investment. Jeff talked about my interest in systems. It's because, systems drive everything. And so for me, it's important not only to think about where do we invest the resources that we have, but also how do we think about that investment. And so research and development, innovation, science, and those things are so critically important to this work because, that's what lasts over time. That continues to drive the work. And so I made this move partly because as we think about the future of decarbonization, of addressing climate change, it's going to continue to take more and more innovation. And I wanted to make sure that part of the drive that we had with innovation was being incredibly inclusive in a much broader way than we are now. That means the type of researchers, the type of scholars, the type of universities, the type of businesses, the type of communities that come to the table to be a part of this. And so I'm looking to all of you all in this audience because you will go out of here and you will go back into your own system and you will influence your system as we all do, or as we hope to do. And I want you to take with you this charge of doing this work in a way that both has substance and form, that both thinks about the infrastructure and that foundation, but also thinks about how do we do that in new and innovative ways, and how do we invite new and other communities to the table. And so finally, as I think about that, I think about the challenges that we have on a daily basis. The weather patterns, tornadoes and fires. And, one of the interesting things about this role is that, every single day I get this report at the beginning of the day that shows me all across the United States and even the world, power outages, fires, hurricanes, storms, and things of that nature. It's a very kind of fascinating thing and interesting thing. I never realized, that all of this is going on, all at one time. And so you think about kind of those challenges that we face and why it's important to address those challenges. And, when I think about this work and that it's going to take all of us to be a part of this, I am optimistic, like the young people said yesterday, about that, but I also know the challenge ahead of us. And I know what happens if we don't meet that challenge. If we don't find a way to come together as a community, as a world, as a people to address these challenges that will affect all of us, nobody's going to be able to hide. Like I said, everybody has to be a part of this. Then, it's not going to only be these folks over here, or these folks over here, or these folks over here. We're all going to be having a hard knock life. And so I want you to go out of here and think about what can you do to contribute to this idea of building a stronger infrastructure, but also creating a more openly innovative community. Because if we can do that, right, we can go from this notion of a hard knock life to, the sun will come out tomorrow. And when the sun comes out tomorrow, we can use that sun to power the future. We use that sun to grow things. It can make us all smile and be happy because at the end of the day, we can't do this individually. We have to do this together. And so once again, I want to thank you all for allowing me to open up this second day of this conference. I want to congratulate you again for 10 years, and I want to charge you all to be the change that you want to see. So thank you very much.